Thou'rt passing from the lake's green side, and the hunter's hearth away, for the time of flowers, for the summer's pride. Daughter, thou canst not stay. Mrs. Hemans, Edith, A Tale of the Woods. Our two adventurers had not far to go. Hurry knew the direction as soon as he had found the open spot and the spring. And he now led on with the confident step of a man assured of his object. The forest was dark, as a matter of course, but it was no longer obstructed by underbrush, and the footing was firm and dry. After proceeding near a mile, March stopped and began to cast about him with an inquiring look, examining the different objects with care, and occasionally turning his eyes on the trunks of the fallen trees, with which the ground was well sprinkled. As is usually the case in an American wood, especially in those parts of the country where timber has not yet become valuable. This must be the place, Deerslayer, March at length observed. Here is a beech by the side of a hemlock, with 3 pines at hand, and yonder is a white birch with a broken top, and yet I see no rock, nor any of the branches bent down, as I told you would be the case. Broken branches are on skillful landmarks, as the least experienced know that branches don't often break of themselves, returned the other, and they also lead to suspicion and discoveries. The Delawares never trust to broken branches unless it is in friendly times and on an open trail. As for the beeches and pines and hemlocks, why, they are to be seen on all sides of us, not only by 2s and 3s, but by 40s and 50s and 100s. Very true, Deerslayer, but you never calculate on position. Here is a beech and a hemlock. Yes, and there is another beech and a hemlock, as loving as 2 brothers, or, for that matter, more loving than some brothers. And yonder are others, for neither tree is a rarity in these woods. I fear me, Hurry. I fear me, Hurry, you are better at trapping beaver and shooting bears than at leading on a blindish sort of a trail. Ha! There's what you wish to find, after all. Now, Deerslayer, this is one of your Delaware pretensions, for hang me if I see anything but these trees, which do seem to start up around us in a most unaccountable and perplexing manner. Look this away, Hurry. Here, in a line with the black oak, don't you see the crooked sapling that is hooked up in the branches of the basswood near it? Now, that sapling was once snow-ridden, and got the bend by its weight, but it never straightened itself, and fastened itself in among the basswood branches in the way you see. The hand of a man did that act of kindness for it. That hand was mine, exclaimed Hurry. I found the slender young thing bent to the earth like an unfortunate creature borne down by misfortune, and stuck it up where you see it. After all, Deerslayer, I must allow you're getting to have an uncommon good eye for the woods. 'Tis improving, Hurry. 'Tis improving, I will acknowledge, but 'tis only a child's eye compared to some I know. There's Tamenund now, though a man so old that few remember when he was in his prime. Tamenund lets nothing escape his look, which is more like the scent of a hound than the sight of an eye. Then Uncas, the father of Chingachgook, and the lawful chief of the Mohicans, is another that it is almost hopeless to pass unseen. I'm improving, I will allow. I'm improving, but far from being perfect, as yet. And who is this Chingachgook, of whom you talk so much, Deerslayer? Asked Hurry as he moved off in the direction of the righted sapling, a loping redskin at the best, I make no question. Not so, Hurry, but the best of loping redskins, as you call him. If he had his rights, he would be a great chief, but as it is, he is only a brave and just-minded Delaware, respected and even obeyed in some things, 'tis true, but of a fallen race, and belonging to a fallen people. Ah, Harry, March, 'Twould warm the heart within you to sit in their lodges of a winter's night and listen to the traditions of the ancient greatness and power of the Mohicans. Hark ye, friend Nathaniel, said Hurry, stopping short to face his companion in order that his words might carry greater weight with them. If a man believed all that other people choose to say in their own favor, he might get an oversized opinion of them, and an undersized opinion of himself. These redskins are notable boasters, and I set down more than half of their traditions as pure talk. There is truth in what you say, Hurry. I'll not deny it, for I've seen it and believe it. They do boast, but then that is a gift from nature, and it's sinful to withstand natural gifts, see? This is the spot you come to find. This remark cut short the discourse, and both the men now gave all their attention to the object immediately before them. Deerslayer pointed out to his companion the trunk of a huge linden, or basswood, as it is termed in the language of the country, which had filled its time and fallen by its own weight. This tree, like so many millions of its brethren, lay where it had fallen, and was mouldering under the slow but certain influence of the seasons. The decay, however, had attacked its center, even while it stood erect in the pride of vegetation, bellowing out its heart, as the sea sometimes destroys the vitals of animal life, even while a fair exterior is presented to the observer. As the trunk lay stretched for near 100 feet along the earth, the quick eye of the hunter detected this peculiarity, and from this and other circumstances he knew it to be the tree of which March was in search. "Aye, here we have what we want," cried Hurry, looking in at the larger end of the linden. "Everything is as snug as if it had been left in an old woman's cupboard. Come, lend me a hand, Deerslayer, and we'll be afloat in half an hour." At this call, the hunter joined his companion, and the two went to work deliberately and regularly, like men accustomed to the sort of thing in which they were employed. In the first place, Hurry removed some pieces of bark that lay before the large opening in the tree, and which the other declared to be disposed in a way that would have been more likely to attract attention than to conceal the cover, had any straggler passed that way. The two then drew out a bark canoe containing its seats, paddles, and other appliances, even to fishing lines and rods. This vessel was by no means small, but such was its comparative lightness, and so gigantic was the strength of Hurry, that the latter shouldered it with seeming ease, declining all assistance even in the act of raising it to the awkward position in which he was obliged to hold it. "Lead ahead, Deerslayer," said March, "and open the bushes. The rest I can do for myself." The other obeyed, and the men left the spot, Deerslayer clearing the way for his companion, and inclining to the right or to the left as the latter directed. In about 10 minutes they both broke suddenly into the brilliant light of the sun, on a low, gravelly point that was washed by water on quite half its outline. An exclamation of surprise broke from the lips of Deerslayer, an exclamation that was low and guardedly made, however, for his habits were much more thoughtful and regulated than those of the reckless Hurry. When on searching the margin of the lake, he beheld the view that unexpectedly met his gaze. It was, in truth, sufficiently striking to merit a brief description. On a level with the point lay a broad sheet of water, so placid and limpid that it resembled a bed of the pure mountain atmosphere, compressed into a setting of hills and woods. Its length was about 3 leagues, while its breadth was irregular, expanding to half a league or even more opposite to the point, and contracting to less than half the distance, more to the southward. Of course, its margin was irregular, being indented by bays and broken by many projecting low points. At its northern or nearest end, it was bounded by an isolated mountain, lower land falling off east and west, gracefully relieving the sweep of the outline. Still, the character of the country was mountainous, high hills or low mountains, rising abruptly from the water, on quite 9/10 of its circuit. The exceptions indeed only served a little to vary the scene, and even beyond the parts of the shore that were comparatively low, the background was high, though more distant. But the most striking peculiarities of this scene were its solemn solitude and sweet repose. On all sides, wherever the eye turned, nothing met it but the mirror-like surface of the lake, the placid view of heaven, and the dense setting of woods. So rich and fleecy were the outlines of the forest that scarce an opening could be seen, the whole visible earth, from the rounded mountain top to the water's edge, presenting one unvaried hue of unbroken verdure. As if vegetation were not satisfied with a triumph so complete, the trees overhung the lake itself, shooting out towards the light, and there were miles along its eastern shore, where a boat might have pulled beneath the branches of dark, Rembrandt-looking hemlocks, quivering aspens, and melancholy pines. In a word, the hand of man had never yet defaced or deformed any part of this native scene, which lay bathed in the sunlight, a glorious picture of affluent forest grandeur, softened by the balminess of June, and relieved by the beautiful variety afforded by the presence of so broad an expanse of water. "This is grand, 'tis solemn, 'tis an edification of itself to look upon," exclaimed Deerslayer, as he stood leaning on his rifle and gazing to the right and left, north and south, above and beneath, in whichever direction his eye could wander. "Not a tree disturbed, even by red-skinned hand, as I can discover, but everything left in the ordering of the Lord, to live and die according to his own designs and laws. Hurry! Your Judith ought to be a moral and well-disposed young woman if she has passed half the time you mention in the center of a spot so favored. That's naked truth, and yet the gal has the vagaries. All her time has not been passed here, howsoever, old Tom having the custom, afore I knowed him, of going to spend the winters in the neighborhood of the settlers or under the guns of the forts. No, Jude has caught more than is for her good from the settlers, and especially from the gallantifying officers. If she has, hurry, this is a school to set her mind aright again. But what is this I see off here, abreast of us? That seems too small for an island and too large for a boat, though it stands in the midst of the water. Why, that is what these galantine gentry from the forts call Muskrat Castle, and old Tom himself will grin at the name, though it bears so hard on his own nature and character. 'Tis the stationary house, there being two, this which never moves, and the other that floats, being sometimes in one part of the lake and sometimes in another. The last goes by the name of the Ark, though what may be the meaning of the word is more than I can tell you. It must come from the missionaries, Hurry, whom I have heard speak and read of such a thing. They say that the earth was once covered with water, and that Noah, with his children, was saved from drowning by building a vessel called an ark, in which he embarked in season. Some of the Delawares believe this tradition, and some deny it. But it behooves you and me, as white men born, to put our faith in its truth. Do you see anything of this ark? 'Tis down south, no doubt, or anchored in some of the bays, but the canoe is ready, and 15 minutes will carry two such paddles as your'n mine to the castle. At this suggestion, Deerslayer helped his companion to place the different articles in the canoe, which was already afloat. This was no sooner done than the two frontiermen embarked, and by a vigorous push sent the light bark some 8 or 10 rods from the shore. Hurry now took the seat in the stern, while Deerslayer placed himself forward, and by leisurely but steady strokes of the paddles, the canoe glided across the placid sheet towards the extraordinary-looking structure that the former had styled Muskrat Castle. Several times the men ceased paddling and looking about them at the scene, as new glimpses opened from behind points, enabling them to see farther down the lake. Or to get broader views of the wooded mountain. The only changes, however, were in the new forms of the hills, the varying curvature of the bays, and the wider reaches of the valley south, the whole earth apparently being clothed in a gala dress of leaves. "This is a sight to warm the heart," exclaimed Deerslayer, when they had thus stopped for the 4th or 5th time. "The lake seems made to let us get an insight into the noble forests, and land and water alike stand in the beauty of God's providence. Do you say, Hurry, that there is no man who calls himself lawful owner of all these glories?" "None but the king, lad. He may pretend to some right of that nature, but he is so far away that his claim will never trouble old Tom Hutter, who has got possession and is like to keep it as long as his life lasts. Tom is no squatter, not being on land. I call him a floater." "I envy that man. I know it's wrong and I strive again the feeling. But I envy that man. Don't think, Hurry, that I'm consorting any plan to put myself in his moccasins, for such a thought doesn't harbor in my mind. But I can't help a little envy. 'Tis a natural feeling, and the best of us are but natural after all, and give way to such feelings at times." "You've only to marry Hetty to inherit half the estate," cried Hurry, laughing. "The gal is comely. Nay, if it wasn't for her sister's beauty, she would even be handsome. And then her wits are so small that you may easily convert her into one of your own way of thinking. In all things. Do you take Hetty off the old fellow's hands, and I'll engage he'll give you an interest in every deer you can knock over within 5 miles of his lake." "Does game abound?" suddenly demanded the other, who paid but little attention to March's raillery. "It has the country to itself. Scarce a trigger is pulled on it, and as for the trappers, this is not a region they greatly frequent. I ought not to be so much here myself, but Jude pulls one way, while the beaver pulls another. More than $100 Spanish has that creature cost me the last 2 seasons, and yet I could not forego the wish to look upon her face once more." "Do the red men often visit the lake, Hurry?" continued Deerslayer, pursuing his own train of thought. "Why, they come and go, sometimes in parties and sometimes singly. The country seems to belong to no native tribe in particular, and so it has fallen into the hands of the Hutter tribe. The old man tells me that some sharp ones have been wheedling the Mohawks for an Indian deed in order to get a title out of the colony, but nothing has come of it, seeing that no one heavy enough for such a trade has yet meddled with the matter. The hunters have a good life lease still of this wilderness. So much the better, Hurry. If I was King of England, the man that felled one of these trees without good occasion for the timber should be banished to a deserted and forlorn region in which no 4-footed animal ever trod. Right glad am I that Chingachgook appointed our meeting on this lake, for hitherto eye of mine never looked on such a glorious spectacle." "That's because you've kept so much among the Delawares, in whose country there are no lakes. Now, farther north and farther west, these bits of water abound, and you're young, and may yet live to see them. But though there be other lakes, Deerslayer, there's no other Judith Hutter!" At this remark, his companion smiled, and then he dropped his paddle into the water, as if in consideration of a lover's haste. Both now pulled vigorously until they got within 100 yards of the castle, as Hurry familiarly called the house of Hutter, when they again ceased paddling, the admirer of Judith restraining his impatience the more readily, as he perceived that the building was untenanted at the moment. This new pause was to enable Deerslayer to survey the singular edifice, which was of a construction so novel as to merit a particular description. Muskrat Castle, as the house had been facetiously named by some waggish officers, stood in the open lake, at a distance of fully 1/4 mile from the nearest shore. On every other side the water extended much farther, the precise position being distant about 2 miles from the northern end of the sheet, and near, if not quite, 1 mile from its eastern shore. As there was not the smallest appearance of any island, but the house stood on piles, with the water flowing beneath it, and Deerslayer had already discovered that the lake was of a great depth, he was fain to ask an explanation of this singular circumstance. Hurry solved the difficulty by telling him that On this spot alone, a long narrow shoal, which extended for a few hundred yards in a north and south direction, rose within 6 or 8 feet of the surface of the lake, and that Hutter had driven piles into it and placed his habitation on them for the purpose of security. The old fellow was burnt out 3 times atween the Indians and the hunters, and in one affray with the redskins he lost his only son, since which time he has taken to the water for safety. No one can attack him here without coming in a boat, and the plunder and scalps would scarce be worth the trouble of digging out canoes. Then it's by no means sartain which would whip in such a scrimmage, for old Tom is well supplied with arms and ammunition, and the castle, as you may see, is a tight breastwork again light shot.